Welcome to GovFocus. I'm Sarah Seibert, Managing Editor, GovCIO Media and Research, and joining me today are Jesus Caban, Chief Data and Analytics Officer at DHA, Nina Porter, Division Chief for the Engineering Solutions Architecture and IT Business Analytics Division at DHA, and Ben Cushing, Senior Principal Chief Architect of Health and Life Sciences at Red Hat. Thank you all for joining me today.
Happy to be here.
Thank you for having us.
So throughout the conversation, we'll discuss how DHA is building the data, infrastructure, and governance frameworks needed to safely scale emerging AI capabilities like generative AI and agentic AI across the military health system. And this is great timing to have this conversation because last week DHA released its data strategy. And Jesus, you were spearheading that initiative. So I'd like to start with you. Could you outline how the 5-year plan provides a foundation as AI capabilities continue to expand?
Yeah, absolutely. So thank you for having me here. Thank you for the opportunity. So yes, in alignment with the Department of War AI strategy, we need to become an AI first organization. However, to become an AI first organization, we first need to look at a key enabler for that is the data. So for the last 12 months, we have been working on focusing on how do we mature in our data analytics space. So we're a combat support agency. How we better support our combating commands out there in the field? How do we support our services? And how we enable our warfighters to have decision advantage with data. So for the last year, we have been working on that. And a couple of weeks ago, we released the DHA data strategy to the public. It can be found in the DHA website. You can go to dha.mil/CDAO and you can download the data strategy there, because we want to make sure either you support DHA or you are an industry partner or you would like to collaborate with us, that you understand, what is our strategy for the data space. And it's not the way we design the strategy. It's not aspirational. It's instead of mission focus, specific deliverables. Specifically, we focus on first roles and responsibilities. Across the agency, we have hundreds of data systems or systems that generate data. We have at the same time hundreds of data requests that come every single month from combating commands, from services, from units, and so on. So we need to learn about roles and responsibilities to be able to better support our warfighters out there. And then an important one that you will see and our industry partners will see is treating data as a product. That is a key initiative that we will continue to mature in the next 1, 2, 3, or 5 years. Because the same way that we treat software, we go and procure software, we do validation, there is an owner, there is version control, there's documentation, all the way to decommissioning that software. We need to treat data the same way. That way, the data that we're delivering today in the ongoing operations for bed status, how many beds DHA has around the world today, how many ICU beds do we have available, how many bags of blood do we have available around the world, those need to be data products with embedded data quality checks, with embedded who's the owner, definitions, and so on, so we can deliver quality data. So that's what you will see as part of this DHA strategy. Once again, that's the foundation to become the AI first organization that we want to become.
Right, that makes sense. And Nina, you're responsible for the implementation side when we talk about becoming an AI first organization. Could you talk more about DHA's AI ecosystem and what goes into establishing that and what's its intent?
Sure, of course. To effectively scale AI across DHA, we're working to obviously establish an AI ecosystem. It will centralize operations to coordinate, integrate, and manage all components of enterprise AI tools. An ecosystem will need to encompass the components needed to support AI's lifecycle. We've been working closely with the CDAO team to make this happen. It starts with governance, establishing policies and standards for acceptable AI use, then stakeholder collaboration to ensure involvement from developers, policymakers, functional SMEs, security engineers, and end users. To do all this, a defined AI lifecycle process is essential. By building a single secure AI foundation with reusable components like authentication, security, and cloud access, we can build a new AI capabilities faster, more securely, and at a lower cost. This strategy fosters scalability and sustainability, enabling DHA improved management of AI tools and includes observability and monitoring of AI utilization across the enterprise. The ecosystem is intended to ensure that all elements work together seamlessly and maximize delivery of enterprise AI solutions.
Right, that makes sense. And Ben, I'd like to turn it over to you. So when we talk about governance versus implementation, what are some of the gaps you're seeing when we look to emerging capabilities like agentic AI?
I think that there's a inclination to go too fast, like to start using
Mhm.
uh, decision making from AI directly in your workflows. Agentic really represents a new form of automation. Like we should be thinking about automation and AI is really the same thing, and that's what agentic represents.
Mhm.
Um, the governance is required, in my opinion, is not just what you see like in the news and in products today, which is guardrails around the AI itself, like how it talks to you or what kind of things it's allowed to think about. Introduction of like toxicity or things like that. Those are guardrails that are built into most AI products right now. Where my attention is on governance is how do we bridge the gap between probabilistic systems and determinism? Okay, and just to quickly explain what that means, in IT systems, pretty much everything is deterministic, meaning if I hit this button, I know what will happen 10, 100,000 steps later, and I can test those steps along the way. The logic is traceable. I can go through the whole path, and I know what to expect on the other end. AI, especially large language models, is probabilistic, meaning that what comes out at the other end is not necessarily something I can expect or trace. It is an unexpected, it's an unknown. And
Mhm.
so, what I focus on a lot right now in clinical care for AI is how to build um, determinism into the probabilistic systems. Okay. I actually just gave an example of this last week at HIMSS where we actually used agentic AI to produce BPMN models, which are the standards for automation in manufacturing and finance and supply chain. And we used it for healthcare to actually create business process models in real time that are reflective of the care that's being done for a patient, but the business process model is actually deterministic.
Mhm.
So the tasks that are getting executed are against that model, not against the AI. And so I've done a couple examples of this, not just BPM, but other types of deterministic artifacts that act as an interstitial layer between an agentic system and the systems that it wants to control.
Yeah, that makes sense. And when we talk about establishing that security, making them more deterministic, Jesus, I'd like to turn it back over to you. I know there's over 100 ongoing projects in MHS's AI inventory. So how are you using these use cases to establish guidance around patient safety, and data breaches?
No, absolutely. So when it comes to, AI, as Ben was just mentioning, sometimes we're moving too fast, and
Hmm.
that is happening constantly with AI. Why? We're getting into this model sprout, where we have uncontrolled, undocumented, untracked number of capabilities out there. So that risk, data leakage that can happen, data breaches, cybersecurity, patient safety, and many other things, right? So how are we tackling those model and AI's sprawl that we're seeing out there? First, by doing an annual inventory, following the OMB requirements as well as the Department of War requirements, we we need to do always an inventory every year to see who is doing what.
Mhm.
So we have been doing this even before it was a requirement. So we started in 2018. That was the first baseline that we did. At that point, we found about 90 projects. At that point, 2018, AI, as we know it today, large language models, was not prominent. It was mostly classic machine learning techniques. In 2024, we did another inventory. At that point, it was about 120 projects that a lot of AI and in different categories, from public health to clinical to research to finances to contracting and so on. So, similar 2025, and then the FY26 inventory, we will kick off that at the beginning of the third quarter, meaning in April now. We will kick off that by sending a memo out to the agency, and everyone responds back. And then we'll start removing, analyzing the data, what are we doing and what we are not doing as well. This is helping because it helps us identify first overlap, how many projects we have in this specific space. For example, last time we found about 10 different projects focusing on mental health, predicting the mental health conditions, those patients at risk, and so on. So what we did, we started bringing different groups together and say, hey, chat, what model are you using versus which other model are you using? So this inventory is helping us with that.
Mhm.
And it's helping us prioritize what needs to be moved across the enterprise, meaning we have smaller efforts in research, in public health, in biosurveillance, and so on. So what are the projects that we need to keep in mind to raise them to the next level to become an enterprise capability? And so those are two examples of how we're using these inventories to be able to have a clear understanding of what we have. And then policy and governance often is behind because we're moving very, very fast in this space. So we have been putting out guidance and interim guidance. And then these inventories are also helping shape and focus on the specific guidance about what to do, what not to do.
Right, yeah. And as some of these capabilities start to scale, Nina, I'd like to turn it back to you. How are you developing a security strategy considering emerging capabilities like agentic AI to ensure that visibility?
Now, this is a great question because security is often an afterthought when new technologies hit the market. DHA's current generative AI platform is built in a cloud native Kubernetes cluster. The advantage of this design allowed us to configure networking in accordance with the medical community of interest and DHA GovCloud security protections. It supports scalability in our secure Medcoin environment. To approach the challenge of incorporating agentic AI, we are working to build a foundational strategy with Model Context Protocol, mostly referred to as MCP. MCP enables transparency by providing a standardized interface that enables model agnostic AI agents to interact with external tools and data sources, thereby enabling a framework of building agentic AI capabilities at an enterprise level. Ultimately, we plan to leverage MCP to enable transparency, traceability, and alignment of AI decisions with mission objectives, while ensuring security measures like access controls, auditability, and observability.
Yeah, and Ben, how is Red Hat approaching MCP?
We started bundling MCP in our products last year, primarily to help Red Hat customers who are using our, like directly involved in running enterprise Linux or using Kubernetes or whatever it might be. And the purpose was to provide like real-time data access for knowledge for the user. So like if I need to look up how to do something, it should happen very quickly. MCP is really quite good at that. In addition to that, because the entire software industry is really moving towards using agentic systems to write software itself, we really needed a way for those agents to actually interface with the underlying architecture. Again, accessing knowledge about how to run a Kubernetes cluster, for instance, or the underlying operating system. So that's why we've started putting MCP directly in the products. That being said, I'm working with like the CDC and NIH on elevating MCP up to the data layer. Um, and I mean, that's what we're talking about here. So it's not just about like how to run a product. It's like how can this server actually serve as a front for all of our data, whether it's being accessed by an AI and as an agent or by a human being. And the reason why I'm so focused on it is MCP is an amazing technology, but it has not yet really seen enterprise testing. It's early, right? It has great promise, but there's missing components. So, for instance, like whenever we bring a new application out into the enterprise, whether it's DHA or any enterprise, it has to go through user acceptance testing, right? There's clinicians a lot of times will go in and test the product for days at a time and provide feedback and all that kind of stuff. It's a standard practice. Well, how do you do UAT for MCP, right? Like, who are the people who are going to test this, and how do you do it at scale? Like, there's just not enough people to test all the possible iterations and types of questions that might get asked and all the different types of logic that might come from the MCP server because it's actively thinking about the content that it's pulling from all these different data sources. Um, I'm focused on that, largely using synthetic data generation. So expanding out, a corpus of questions into thousands and thousands of questions to essentially test the MCP server's accuracy. I think this is going to be really important for public health in general. I also in this practice, I'm also discovering other areas where we need to harden MCP for public health, and I'm putting most of my attention and Red Hat resources and the partner ecosystem to address these as quickly as possible.
Right, yeah, that's exciting. And you mentioned that the MCP hasn't really reached that enterprise level yet. Um, Applying some of the benefits from MCP, how can they help organizations protect against AI hallucinations or some of those security risks that we've been seeing?
I think a lot of times when we talk about AI agents, I think people get caught up on the AI part.
Yeah.
An agent itself is really a combination of three things. It's the system prompt, right? It's the prompt that defines how the agent's going to behave. It's the memory that the agent holds, like what context is it operating under? And then it's a large language model, usually the logic engine that's behind it. And often you have agents that are entirely separated from the large language model. So, for instance, most agents that are developed today are applications really that are running locally, like on your server, that are then referencing a large language model service out in the cloud. Um, that behavior is fine. It's just that there's a lot of chat going back and forth, right? It's like very transactionally expensive. And then also, you don't necessarily control that large language model service or the large language model itself. And so, one of the areas where we're really focused on is how do we take the large language model that's out there in a service and bring it closer to where the agent actually resides, and agents, plural. In addition to that, there's Jesus referred to this a second ago about routing. When you have a query that comes in from a user, you want the model that is the most aligned to the question, right? If I ask a question, I need the model with the best domain expertise, but I also need the model that's the cheapest to run. I don't need to always use a 200 billion parameter model to answer a question. If it can be answered by a 20 billion parameter model, that's the one I want. And so what's really interesting about agents is that they're independent of the large language model, meaning that the agent that's answering you, if it's properly getting routed through an inference server, it can select the proper model, meaning that you just cut back on your expenses dramatically. And this is going to be really, really important as we bring on agentic development because we're going to have hundreds, if not thousands, of agents running all the time. You can't afford to have all of them hitting the most expensive services.
Right. And Nina, I saw you nodding
Yeah,
along. Would you like to jump in?
of course. Yeah. So I'm glad that you brought that up, Ben, because a thought that we're exploring or an option for DHA is building a front end that does semantic routing and will direct a prompt to the correct LLM, because we don't want it to go to the most expensive LLM, or if it's not a clinical request, go to our clinically approved LLMs. We would want that prompt to be routed to a more generic one. So maybe it would go to genai.mil, which is open to CUI. So we are exploring solutions like that because we want to make sure that we're managing the way prompts are directed at the agency so that we can instill the most protections at the prompt level.
Right, that makes sense. And as users start to adopt this, especially when we talk about clinical care, how are you all ensuring safe and responsible use of these capabilities? Dr. Caban, I'd like to start with you for this one.
Sure. So, thank you for mentioning the safe and responsible use of AI because I would say that's part of our core principles
Mhm.
with this adoption. As I mentioned at the beginning, yes, we need to become an AI first organization, and we're pushing hard on that. Right now, as of March of this year, we have about 58,000 employees leveraging GenAI.mil. That is about a 34% adoption rate. So we have, 58,000 people using that. When it comes to ambient listening, we have now right now about 10,000 as of March, 10,000 providers enabled with that. Within a month, we will have about 30,000 providers. But yes, we want to move fast. We want to innovate, but in a responsible way. So all the models out there, we encourage, first, anything needs to be following, any vendor out there that wants to provide anything to the agency. First, they follow the responsible AI toolkit that the Department of Work has out there. And I encourage anyone to just, that has IT capabilities to go and read and take their capabilities through that set of questions that the responsible AI toolkit has out there. Second, making sure we have model cards and data cards. Right now, that is not a requirement as of today. As we implement policies for the agency, that will become a requirement. What are your data cards? What are your model cards? How the model was trained? What kind of data? How it was validated and tested? And then when it comes to clinical settings, the clinical validation is critical. For example, for this ambient listening, for other tools coming, being transparent about how it was validated, that will become a requirement. And last but not least, for the agency and the users, we are doing a lot of work in making sure they understand um, how to report back. Meaning, sometimes if there is a patient safety issue, report it as a patient safety report. If there's cybersecurity issue you're concerned, or report it to the respective organization for cybersecurity. If it's a data leakage that you're concerned, that report it as to the patient privacy office as a potential data breach. If it's a model not responding correctly some specific prompts, report it as issues with the potential AI model card and so on. So those are some of the steps that we are taking to make sure that we can innovate, we can embrace AI and integrate it with our workflows daily, but at the same time in a responsible way.
Right.
And something else that we're doing, it is increasing the literacy, because right now providers and techs and nurses and admin staff, they're fantastic. But most of them have not gone through formal training about how to use AI, how to do prompt engineering correctly, how to validate answers and prompt in such a way that decreases the chances of wrong answers. So we're doing a lot of investment in the literacy side, meaning data and AI literacy is a key priority for the organization.
Mhm. And Nina, is there anything that you would like to add?
Sure. So safe use requires a proactive approach that combines design, technical safeguards, and user engagement. By prioritizing transparency, accountability, and continuous improvement, we can harness AI's transformative potential while minimizing risks and ensuring trust. For example, with our DHA Sage implementation, we designed the AI platform with banners and notifications of acceptable use. The platform is also trained to communicate with the user if a response has the potential to not be entirely accurate and will cite sources. So it's kind of an exchange between the AI tool and the user to have some more transparency in the responses. We're also building an AI firewall to configure rules that can block prompts containing sensitive data or challenge the user to determine if they should proceed with the prompt. To manage threats, we maintain logs of AI utilization to enable audits and accountability. Also, as Jesus said, training the user community on acceptable use with sensitive data is critical. We need to ensure the users understand the AI capabilities and limitations. This is the disruptive technology with rapid adoption, and establishing policies for AI use, including guidelines for data handling, decision making, and accountability is a key requirement.
Mhm. Ben, and we'll close it out with you.
I think one of the things I talk about a lot these days is that agentic architecture is very similar, if not the same, as microservice architecture.
Mhm.
And what's important about that distinction is that in a Kubernetes cluster, which is probably where you're going to be running your agents for, scaling and portability and everything else, there's service meshes. Okay, and when you stand up microservices on a Kubernetes cluster, those service meshes are capable of recording the conversation that happens between applications. Okay, they're also capable of enforcing policy for communications between applications. So if we extend this concept over to agents, imagine a bunch of agents running under a service mesh, where a metaphor would be if you have a group of people sitting around a room talking to each other, we don't know what each person's thinking, right? But we do know what they're saying to each other. And from that, you can infer what's going on, what the conversation's about. In the same way, a microservices architecture is capable of logging all the conversations that are happening between agents. So we know what's going on and we can log it and keep track of it. We can also enforce policy, meaning that if agents are going down some sort of rat hole where they're spinning out on something that's not accurate or what was intended, the policy guardrails can stop that behavior. Nina just hit on that directly, which is you can actually put a rules engine right into this same environment, which can enforce the actual communications that's going on between the agents. I think that's a really, really important distinction, not talked about enough, really, about the nature of how we do microservice architecture and the similarities. Like using existing deterministic artifacts as a safeguard between the agents and the systems they're going to eventually automate. And within that interstitial layer, whether it's BPMN or rules or whatever it is, you also include a human in the loop. And that's really the last step, which is you need a human being who is responsible for what the AI is ultimately going to do, because in total, we have to be able to assign culpability. Okay, we need to be able to say who is responsible for the risk that the AI represents. And we're going to have that problem for many, many years. And I think one of the ways to get ahead of it is to embrace that concept right now. Um, and in closing, I'll just say the best way to start guardrailing against AI and making it safe for everyone is to actually use it, right? To embrace it and move forward, like Dr. Koban's talking about. When organizations put their head in the sand and ignore it and try to shut down the behavior of the users, the employees, and so on, they will eventually use it. And because you're not ahead of it, that's when you actually create the most risk for your organization.
Well, thank you all for joining to discuss how some of those use cases are evolving, how users should use it, and I'm looking forward to seeing how DHA continues to build on its data strategy and some of those governance frameworks you all have in place. So thank you for taking the time to chat with me today.
Thank you, Sarah.
Thank you for having us.